Welcome back to Beauty Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jocelyn Dias. On today's episode, we will be talking about the portrayal of women's bodies in film and television. Women are most often portrayed in one of two ways, either fat or skinny. Typically, fat people are shown as funny, they're the sidekick, or they're the stupid character. They're usually the sidekick to the main character, or they're either portrayed as ugly, unfortunately. All in all, they do serve as a tool to make their thinner counterpart, usually the lead character, feel better about themselves and look better in comparison. According to the representation of fat women and girls in Hollywood from the Representation Project, fat women are twice as likely to be portrayed as funny rather than a non-fat character. They're also more likely to be shown as stupid, as well as 6 times less likely to be portrayed as attractive in comparison to a non-fat woman. Pitch Perfect showcases these statistics in a variety of ways. The movie series is about an a cappella group, a college a cappella group that goes to competitions. This a cappella group contains mostly skinny women, except for one, whose character is actually named Fat Amy. That is the character name, which already puts this in motion. And Fat Amy is there. She introduces herself that way in the beginning of the film and on a quote from the character so that the other skinny girls don't do it behind her back. She gets it all out on the table right there. And it showcases kind of her journey with the a cappella group, and she is, once again, she's portrayed as the less attractive character. She's portrayed as the funny one, and she's the one that says all of the outlandish things and does all of the things that are considered stupid or silly, and is considered there to make her best friend, the tiniest character in the movie, look better and feel better, essentially. Fat Amy is confident, loud, outgoing, and she has many humorous lines within the series. And she uses her weight to her advantage through her humor to get through college, but she probably is struggling deep down, and that is why she's making the jokes. But the film does not showcase that portion. The film only shows her trying to make jokes about her weight and jokes about everything to cope with the reality, and we don't see that. We don't see that side of the film. And especially with the costumes that the girls in the a cappella group wear, they're very tight. They're like blouses, very tight blazers, short skirts, and you can tell in some of them, there's one and there's another side character that comes in the second movie that you can tell they had to have a bigger size because a piece of their outfit is different than the other girls and the thinner girls. So you can see the divide on the screen. They tried to get it as close as possible, but you can tell that they didn't have all of the sizes available, which is very unfortunate because it sticks out like a sore thumb. Already, because someone is larger, they are more likely to stick out, and then especially in film, that is kind of the routine. And then now they're sticking out because they don't have the same shirt as the skinnier girls. Fat Amy's love interest ends up making fun of her weight in the movie, and you can tell she's really upset about it when watching the film, and eventually they do end up together, and he ends up apologizing for all that. The point of his character was also kind of to be a jerk, but the fact that the first thing he would make fun of her is her weight, and she would get really upset about it in the film, also shows the fat shaming and how that really impacts people. Even if we don't talk about it directly, it was there, and it was definitely prevalent in the film. But that part almost also kind of got glazed over, and the other girls in the a cappella group were definitely there to help her and support her, but it wasn't talked about that she was fat shamed. It was more just, don't listen to him, he's just being whatever, and didn't even acknowledge the comment that he said. However, on the contrary to this, one of the thinner characters got a whole minute of a scene in the movie and very clear, direct support about the exact topic about her vocal nodules, since they're in an a cappella group. She got a whole minute about that. And it wasn't even that big of a deal for the group. She was still able to sing, and it was all fine. But she got a whole minute of screen time for nodules versus getting fat shamed by a guy she liked, and she got 15 seconds for that. So it also shows the discrepancy in character size through that. Since fat women are seen as less desirable on screen, they are also far less likely to have lead roles in films. This was noted in a study by Mayer and Conroy in 2023 about representation in children's television. New and popular programming for kids in 2022 was examined and showed that less than 3% of the programming contained an overweight female lead. According to 2023 Oscar report from the Representation Project, only one film in Oscar history with a fat woman lead has ever been nominated for the award, and that was the movie Precious in 2010. Only one has been nominated, meaning none of them have won yet. The hit show This Is Us combines both the fat and the skinny portrayal and explores both perspectives of that. There's the mother, Rebecca. She is very tall, skinny, and very typical portrayal of what you see in Hollywood. And her daughter on the show, Kate, is short and she is a larger person. Kate always felt inadequate in comparison to her mother, and because she started out as a fat kid and continued that throughout her whole life. The show did a really good job of capturing the dynamic because Rebecca was unable to understand what Kate was going through, and there are a couple of select scenes. There was one where they went to the town pool and the other girls would make fun of Kate because she was fat, and that was in their bathing suits and everything, so she would get made fun of at the pool. And Rebecca was also always on Kate when she was younger about her food intake and what she was eating, and that kind of made things worse too because Rebecca never really had to worry about that, but Kate always had to watch her food and have her perfect mother monitor her food intake all the time. They're at the pool at the same episodes when Kate would be getting made fun of for being fat. Rebecca, the mother, she would be looked at by every person that walked by, and people would just be taking in the view of her. Another example from the show, Kate ends up going to what they call on the show fat camp, where a bunch of people go and try to get strategies to lose weight. She actually meets a very skinny woman. And at first, Kate is very resentful towards this girl because she's thinking, you're skinny, you don't need to go to fat camp. But turns out this girl has an eating disorder where she is trying to build healthier habits. Number one, thinking she's fat, but then number two, this girl also was trying to get healthier habits and try to get into a better routine of that because weight goes on both sides. Eating disorders are also very prominently represented in shows. Usually they're praised, they're worshipped. In This Is Us, it was actually showing the viewers somebody that had an eating disorder that was struggling and was trying to get help, and she did. Over the course of the series, she no longer had an eating disorder. Kate and this girl that she met became best friends, and it all worked out very well. It was a very different portrayal than the typical encouragement of eating disorders in Hollywood, so I really do appreciate This Is Us for their contribution to that. The show teaches Kate that people of weight differences are more similar than she once thought, and it's not always glamorous for people on the other side. That is other misconstrued concept that people who are thinner always seem to have a better time, but you never really know what anybody's going through. And eating disorders are an example, and you never really know what's going on in somebody's life, no matter their size. And Hollywood likes to stereotype people and put very skinny people in certain boxes, as well as larger people. And getting rid of the labels in Hollywood and in life in general is definitely a great way to combat that. And This Is Us definitely takes that first step by introducing these two characters and showing just how similar they are, even though you would never think that based on the way they look. Here to talk more about this topic is adjunct professor and UHeart alumna Noreen Fasulo.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to discuss your topic today and dive into it.
Thank you so much for joining today. I'm also very excited to talk about it. So, TV and film have taken strides to combat the stigma against larger people on screen, but statistics show there's still much room to improve. How do you feel about the portrayal of women's bodies on the screen?
Yeah, Jocelyn, so I've been thinking about this a bit to kind of think of a TV show that would reflect everything that you've been studying and everything that you've been talking about. And the fact that I've been having a hard time trying to think of one, I think reflects the topic. So obviously, throughout the studies you've done and what you'll be talking about, women's bodies are portrayed in a very specific way, very skinny, maybe curvy, male gaze. A lot of it all goes back to the male gaze. And as young women, as young children, we kind of all grew up looking at this specific body standard, thinking that it's the correct way. And now I was trying to sit down and think of a TV show that maybe has a different form of body representation. And the first thing that actually came to my mind, have you ever seen the show Euphoria?
I have.
Okay, so you know the character Kat in the show?
Yes.
Yes. So she is supposed to be portrayed as the quote unquote, I hate to use this word, but this is actually, I've read some interviews beforehand, as like the fat character, right? And how they portray her character, I think on the show shows off the show how much of a negative effect it was. She actually spoke out saying that she did not want to be back on the show because they don't like how they portrayed her character. She wanted to be portrayed completely in a different sense. And because of her body image, so her actual character was talking about in an interview, she felt almost like now that it's not like the stereotypical skinny girl, she's still being sexualized in a sense that isn't a good way. And that's actually why I know there's all these rumors up in the air of like, is there going to be another season? But her character actually pulled out saying, I don't want to be seen as like this not skinny character. I'm not doing it anymore. So that's kind of the first example that I thought of. And another example I thought of is I'm a really big fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. And a lot of the time, the queens will be judged on how their bodies do look and will be told to like cinch, to wear bodysuits, or they'll joke around and be like, oh, there's blubber, there's fat, we can see it. And as a young girl, I always watched that show. I've always loved that show. Even seeing it as people, quote unquote, dressing up as women being put down for the way their natural bodies look, I think, is something that always stood out to me as well. So that question that you had for me of, can you think of a show where body positivity is shown? I got stuck. That was kind of a hard thing to think of.
Yeah, both of your examples were very good. I didn't even think of Euphoria. I love Euphoria, and that's right. That Barbie Ferreira, she pulled out because she didn't like her character portrayal. And it's interesting having her conform to a standard of a skinny person, not a positive standard of a skinny person, but one of the negative things about being thin in the media. They decided to have a larger person do the same thing. So that's really unfortunate. Instead of taking a body positivity moment, they picked the negative portion of thinner people and decided to do that for people of all sizes. So it's definitely taking steps, but not always in the right direction.
And even like thinking about that, I hate how we put a label on it. It could have just been her character's coming on the show and she's coming to play another character, having a smaller person, having a larger person. I think putting the label on it also makes it stick out. Like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to see? It should just be a character, an actor, an actress on the show playing that specific part and not having them represent a certain body look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And that happens in a lot of different shows I've noticed. A lot of the larger actors will be interviewed and almost they'll be asked, how does it feel to be the only larger person in the cast? Or how does it feel breaking down this barrier for this larger person? It's never all about the content itself. It always revolves around the weight of the character. But when you see like Zendaya thinking Euphoria, she would never be asked about that. She would be asked about her character development, and in Euphoria, the exploration of playing a drug addict and more character development, not her size, where Barbie, on the other hand, would be solely like, how does it feel to break down these fat woman barriers? So it's a very different interview in a lot of shows.
Absolutely.
And it's definitely hard to think of more positive representations, and I was really only able to think of one myself. I am a big Grey's Anatomy person, and they have become so accepting of different body sizes, gender identities, everything. They have become very supportive over the seasons of differing bodies, but it's sad that it took so long for me to come up with that example, and only because I've watched all 20 seasons did I even think of it. So a show that needs 20 seasons to get progressive is kind of where we're at in society right now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think just I keep reflecting back onto this, but both of us having trouble thinking of a show plays a lot. And I don't want to, you could be like, Noreen, you're going too much out of the realm or the question. But I think a lot of this also goes back to our brains as children and what we take in, what we notice, what we don't notice, commercials, advertisements, the way maybe people speak to us, the way parents speak to us. That female body that society sees as the correct body really has imprinted all of our brains. And then also, and I'm sure you know this, all plays through kind of like that male gaze. So, what does the man see and what does the man like, you know? And we're slowly starting to get to a point in society where, you have your body positivity influencers that are totally changing the game on Instagram and on TikTok. And I mean, please, I can have a whole other conversation about that because I do think it's a really amazing thing, but I also think a lot of these body positivity influencers' bodies still don't look like normal people's bodies. I've had a lot of conversations with other people seeing, this one influencer who promotes like maybe a stretch mark or maybe some rolls while she sits down. And I look and I say, well, my body still doesn't look like that. And that's supposed to be that body positivity influencer. So it ripples out into a whole bunch of different things. And I don't want to go off track, Jocelyn, because I could talk about this for hours.
I could too. That's why I'm glad I had you on. And I'm glad I get to do the podcast. It kind of shows in the past episodes, I'll show you all the episodes, we kind of have talked about everything you just said. And it started with social media influencers in the first episode and that impact. And then moving into advertising and how influencers are impacting that. Also, all revolving around body positivity. And how there's just so many avenues for it and outlets. And I could have done so many more episodes on this too. It was hard to narrow it down. I will say that was the most difficult part of all of this. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, even when influencers say, "Look at my one role," and people are looking at them having like themselves having 6 roles, and they're like, "Oh, I'm still not good at like I have too much of it," which is unfortunate. And that kind of leads into my next question. How has the stigma against larger people impacted you personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, especially at my age, I'm turning 25, I will share. This is the age I feel like my grandparents have always told me this mother, any kind of woman figure in my life where, you're getting ready to have a baby, like your hips are getting wider, things along those lines that maybe when you were in high school, college, you weren't really prepping for, I guess, in a sense. So your body's changed when you enter your 20s, and it's a really hard thing to comprehend, to understand as a female, especially because as we keep going back to all the things we see in the media. So I will say this generation, I mean, I'm 25, and as a little like 10-year-old on, I'll say 14. I wasn't on Tumblr at 10. 14-year-old on Tumblr seeing like all these like really, really skinny girls. I mean, the aesthetic was like collarbones and ribs. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of trigger warning, but a lot of like eating disorder tendencies on Tumblr were totally a thing when I was younger and almost unfortunately celebrated in a sense. It was like the trend. You wanted to repost it and put it on your page. Now, getting all the way to 25, watching my body change again in a different sense to seeing all these body positivity influencers on Instagram. Jocelyn, I do appreciate it in a sense. I know I was just talking crap for a second about these body positivity influencers, but I do appreciate it because there's a lot of young kids now seeing these, and this is a step forward compared to, maybe what I was, or maybe you, I don't know, we're seeing when we were younger. We're taking strides, we're taking steps forward to, okay, we're not celebrating these eating disorders, we're not celebrating stick thin bodies that aren't healthy, we're celebrating healthy bodies. I mean, there's a whole positive liberation movement, whatever you want to call it, on social media right now, like celebrating eating a meal, celebrating feeling bloated and things like that. So if I do want to take a second and step back from that negative portrayal that I kind of have of it, because I'm always going to be a critic, I'm always going to rip things apart, but having these not only young girls, but any young kid see that it's okay to eat and feel full. It's okay to be bloated. It's okay to have, rolls, I think is really amazing for me to see. And then selfishly taking it in as a 25-year-old and almost healing my inner child in a sense of being like, oh, okay, now I see this and now I know it's okay. Okay, my circling back to what I was saying in the beginning, I'm not planning on having kids anytime soon, but how women's bodies change, it's okay for me to feel this way, and it's okay for me to still love myself in a sense. I do love this body positivity movement that's happening. And then again, as an academic person, I'm always going to critique everything that I see and always find something wrong with it because that's naturally what I do. Taking a step back from it, I do think that it's a really beautiful thing. And I think that this younger generation has a lot of potential to keep pushing this and keep breaking these barriers and things. And I'm hoping that this is going to keep getting better and we're going to keep seeing more representation. It's not going to end here. There's a lot more representation that needs to be seen.
That's great. There is so much to critique, as we've talked about, but it's also good to recognize the progress that we've made. Like you said, I was not on Tumblr. I mean, I was not even allowed on social media forever.
Good.
So I did not see that part of it, but even just TV, a lot of it when I was younger, I even saw it on TV, even then, like kids' cartoons. And it was funny. My mom always watched America's Next Top Model, so I had a lot of exposure to that. And my mother, even though she watched it, she felt the same way. She hated that how critical the judges were and that it was one body type, one body portrayal. But I mean, it's reality TV. It's one of those you just keep going back at the same time. So we still talk about it all these years later and how there's new reality shows and even like RuPaul's Drag Race. That's still going, right? They're making new seasons.
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay.
My favorite.
Yeah, but how, like, you go from America's Next Top Model, which is one model, one type, over into RuPaul's Drag Race, which is supposed to be more accepting, yet they're doing the same thing there. So
Absolutely.
definitely it's steps. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's better than not taking any steps. There's definitely more representation, and that's definitely something to appreciate. But there's also still the same underlying themes that need to be addressed.
Jocelyn, I'm so happy that you were not allowed on Tumblr. And I'm sure our brain chemistries are very different from that. I mean, if you talk to people my age group, I'm sure they can all, really emphasize the fact that I think a lot of us, our brains were really confused at the info that we were taking in. There was like a solid 4 years of Tumblr that were very focused on very unhealthy eating, body images, that I think really played a role in a lot of these like late 20-year-old Gen Z millennial cuspy kind of vibes of people that are just like, whoa, trying to process this whole new body positivity wave that's coming because that it was not like that when we grew up. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to sound a little young. I'm 21, but Tumblr, what is it similar to now in terms of social media platforms? Like, what was Tumblr?
oh, okay, yeah. So Tumblr, if I had to compare it to something, I would say Instagram. Not really kinds of Instagram. Tumblr wasn't really like Noreen's profile. You didn't really show the world that it was you. It was kind of more of an aesthetic, I guess I would explain. So you would have, it wasn't called this, but you would have like a For You page where you would follow people. There was no algorithm. It was just simply who you followed and it would push what they were posting, right? So if you liked that aesthetic, then you would repost it onto your page. But where it got tricky was that if you followed somebody and they followed somebody, they could repost it and then it would pop up on your page. So I wasn't really the one promoting it and posting stuff on my Tumblr, but I was more of like a secondhand observer seeing all these posts. But it was almost kind of like a little bit of like a secret platform. You weren't really going around like, your name on it. No, no, no. I think my name was something like silly with a flower or something. I don't know. You weren't really like posting pictures of yourself. It was more so other people and like Tumblr famous individuals, I guess.
That's interesting. It sounds almost in my head like a combination of Instagram and Twitter in one platform. In a way, like with the retweeting, how people just retweet everything.
Yes.
But that does sound nice. The days before algorithm definitely sounds nice.
Absolutely.
I mean, the things that were being spread on there were not nice, but being able to just see what people you followed were posting, that does sound kind of nice. And
yeah, right. Algorithm is a whole different world now.
It absolutely is. Now my Instagram is mostly ads. I'll get excited to see something from somebody I follow. I'll be like, wait, what's this? I actually follow this person? But
Yes, to hop off topic, I recently bought like a kitty litter robot, and I kid you, I bought it. I want to tell the company, like, you don't need to keep pushing your ads. Every single post, it's a post and then an ad, and then a post
right,
and an ad. I'm like,
exactly.
I gave you my money already. Leave me alone.
I know, that's the worst. After you already bought something, and then they start with the ads. Like, I get it if they're trying to get you to buy something, but I
Exactly.
already got it, though. Like, I don't need to see it again.
The
But
influence of social media still plays a role.
exactly. I could do a whole social media podcast. It could be a whole separate project.
Right?
But now I feel like I have gone off topic because I was curious about Tumblr. But I get to TV and film. How do you think that we could start to change that stigma against larger people?
I think what we spoke about a little bit before about kinds of labeling certain individuals could kind of be the step to start to change it. Instead of having a smaller woman play a part or a larger woman play a part, having a woman play a part, period. We're not going to have so and so play this part to break these quote unquote barriers. That shouldn't be put on a certain person's shoulders unless they want to. That's a completely different story. But I think Euphoria and Kat played a perfect example of that a female, an individual should play a character because that's the character they want to play. I think that could be the first step. Representation is super important, but I think it's the way that we go about representation and taking pressure off of certain people's shoulders. So I think you brought it up before, but like they would sit Kat down and be like, well, Barbie, how did it feel to, break these characters and play a larger woman on this show? What about how did it feel to play the character of Kat on Euphoria? If that makes sense, what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting rid of the labels is was what I'm hearing, and that is absolutely the first step. And playing people and playing characters, casting people because they're a good fit for the character, personality wise, because they did the best, like reading the script, getting into the character, not you're a certain size, here you go, now you can play the character. Like, people should be able to play the character for other reasons because there are many other attributes that make a good character, and especially for Kat, that was the point, that she kind of became the OnlyFans person, and she was the one trying to, mess around with other people and like exploring herself in more explicit ways. And I mean, a lot of the characters did on the show, but it was kind of almost she was just there to project herself in a way for a while rather than being an actual person. And it went through like her whole backstory of being like a shy person, kind of didn't really talk to anybody, to full blown OnlyFans and full blown getting around with everybody and talking to everybody all the time. So it was a very intense transition too. And that was part of
Yeah.
the statement they were making, like, because now she's going to be bigger and more in charge, like large and in charge, I feel like was kind of the message that they were going with.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Everything that I just tried to say, you put in perfect words, is what I will say. And I think that the producers, everyone who kind of put Euphoria together, I think they tried to have the right intention about the way that they were going to do it, but it didn't come out right, in my opinion. And I
Right.
think a lot of people will say the same thing, including her character and like you said, that large and in charge role. But why can't Barbie just play Kat, who does what Kat wants to do? It doesn't really reflect on what Kat looks like in a sense.
Right, and that was a really good point about what Kat wants to do. We don't know that because she was forced to kind of go into this other role, and she was forced to go from one extreme to the other because of her size, both by society, by the role, by the writing, by everything. Was forced to take this big leap of faith from being very quiet and reserved to going all the way to the other side. And it would be interesting to see what the producers looked like, what size the producers were. I feel like we need more people on screen, absolutely, that are of varying sizes, but we also need people behind the screen because we need people that live this experience, live through these stereotypes to be the ones writing about, or at least like doing an interview about what to write for these characters, because
Absolutely.
people that are thinner, and in Hollywood everywhere, a lot of people are thinner, and I feel like it would be interesting to have a larger woman be at least interviewed and have a say in writing the script, maybe read it over or try to talk about the idea that they're trying to convey before they put it on screen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you're gonna have to fact check me, but I'm almost 99% sure that they're tiny white men that wrote these parts. And I think that you hit a really important topic. Representation is super important because at the end of the day, nobody understands what somebody's going through unless they're experiencing it themselves. And representation in anything is super, super important. And yes, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe they're tiny white men, which obviously it shows. And like I said, I think they tried with it. I don't think there were any bad intentions, but it did not come out correct, in my opinion.
Right. And I also don't really know like the behind the scenes. I know Zendaya had a part, but I'm sure besides her, it was a lot of tiny little white men. So I'm sure you are correct on that. But I actually just reminded myself of something with Zendaya being the producers. I've noticed that a lot more people that are starring in television and film have more of a behind the scenes role as well, or certain shows where they switch it up. Like if someone's a not a main character but comes in for certain episodes, I've noticed they'll produce certain episodes but not be in the episode or direct it. So I feel like that is more what we need too. Even though that is a lot more work for the actors, I think it would be more
I agree.
beneficial because they know the characters, at least. Even if it's good, bad, or ugly, they know the character that they're playing better than the people that are behind the scenes. So if we get more people behind the scenes that are also on camera, people that are very well versed in both, I think that's going to make phenomenal television and film in the future.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic point. And it all goes back to that keyword representation. You can't be portraying something if you've never experienced it yourself. It's not accurate.
Right, it's not.
It's not morally right.
Yeah, there's morals too, but that's a whole different topic of morally right in Hollywood. But
Hmm.
but you're right though, it's moral and the representation is really what we need.
Absolutely. This could be completely off topic, and I don't know where your episodes went, but I think something Karen and I have spoken about a lot. I think when it comes with like the idea of like the female body, a lot of it, unfortunately, like we say, that male gaze stems down to like younger male gaze, which porn, I think, plays a really, really big part in how, these young men grow up to want to see a specific body type. And I think this industry is starting to change. I would hope so, but it's very much like a skinny, small girl, right? So unfortunately, you have these young, small brains developing to see, oh, okay, that's how a female's supposed to look. That's what an attractive female looks like. They start to grow older, and then that's what happens. So we can sit back and we can look at all these TV shows and observe them. We can also realize the root of where a lot of little like brains are unfortunately being formed, male brains. And that's extensive conversations Karen and I have had about it. And again, I know I don't want to jump off track because you're specifically focusing on TV shows, but I think that whole industry creates a whole other problem of the male gaze and what a female should quote unquote look like.
That's a
I don't know
really
if
good
that's something
point. I
you ever
didn't
thought about. Yeah.
I didn't even really think about porn, but that in a way it's not like a TV show, but it's something people watch online,
Mhm.
and it once again has that same issue of representation, and I think that's where Kat kind of had a double barrier to break. It had the one within her own friend group within Hollywood, but then it also had one on OnlyFans, and it was showing how she broke down that barrier too, and how people who watch porn want to see, but they just want to see everybody though, let's be real. But it was almost like that double barrier that she had to take down, and I mean, one of those on its own is a lot. So then having to do the porn portion of it and fight
Yeah.
against all these very skinny girls on there for the male gaze, in addition to TV. That was a
Yeah.
really good connection, and that was a really good point.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just it's unfortunately my brain, I try to go any kind of media intake, that young children are taking in, and a lot of it also just goes back to the male gaze, like we keep saying. But yeah, I didn't even think to bring it back to cats, so that was a great point as well. And then all these barriers that Barbie's asking to break, I honestly wonder, Jocelyn, if before she signs up for the role they were like, hey, we're going to need you to do this representation and break this barrier and yada yada yada, because it almost seems like from the interviews after that she was a little taken aback, being like, oh, I didn't realize that I was going to be subjected to a lot of the things that they made her character do.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see how the audition went and how they described the part to the people
Character.
that were auditioning, and if they knew what it was actually going to be like. Would the same people have auditioned? Even people that didn't get the part, would they even have auditioned if they knew what it was going to be like? And then seeing her make it in the part, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, she wouldn't have done it again, and she doesn't want to do it again, which is why there's so much discrepancy about if they're coming back.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good of her to take that stand. She doesn't feel comfortable doing it, and she doesn't feel comfortable representing that character or herself that way, that she shouldn't do it. And I'm glad that she was able to do that and
Yeah.
inspire other people too, because she's been talking out so much about it. Now we've all been following along with it and seeing what really happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess as my last little note of one, I want to thank you for letting me discuss and talk on your podcast today.
Thank you for
But
coming on.
yes, of course. And I think this is just such an important topic that needs to continue to be spoken about and ripped apart, because although as society we are taking those steps to get better, we're having, more representation, having more conversations about it, there is a long, long way to go. So I hope that people keep talking about this, people keep realizing, keep watching these shows. Hey, what did they do right? What did they do wrong? Where can we fix this? And just keep exploring this topic to, help our future of young people to accept and love their bodies and themselves.
I appreciate you coming on, and you have so much knowledge about all of this, and it seems like you're used to having these conversations too. You came on very ready to go, ready to talk about it, and I really appreciate that, because we need to keep talking about it for the younger generations, like you said, and also something you said earlier, to heal us from our childhood when we did not have that, because
Yeah.
like the Gen Z millennial cusp really did not have a great support system on that, and parents didn't really know what was going on, and nobody really knew that all of this was happening until it was too late. So, and then even on TV, people just assumed it was out of their control. And
Right.
maybe at a time it was, when we had fewer social media apps and less communication with each other, but now it is very much in our control, and I'm glad to see a lot of celebrities trying to take back that control. Influencers, actresses, actors, everybody seems to be trying to take that back, and it still has a long way to go, but people that have followings and have clout are using their power for good, and it's very, very nice to see that they're using that and they're trying to combat against those standards.
Yeah, yeah, it's important for our younger individuals, but then like you said, our millennials, our Gen X, Gen Z, I'll even give it to the boomers. Maybe we all need some inner child healing. And I think taking this movement forward and society continuing to work on this will maybe heal everybody a little bit from things that weren't so good.
Absolutely. With that, we are wrapping up Beauty Unfiltered. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you've learned something new about different media sources and the impact they have on the portrayal of women.